I am sitting here looking at the numbers, and it is remarkably clear that most people are walking straight into a financial buzzsaw while checking their social media feeds. Complexity is a status signal for people who want to feel smart but stay poor. Most people in their 20s struggle to save a few thousand bucks, let alone invest, and I get it because I was the exact same way. I did not grow up with money, and I did not have some huge salary waiting for me out of college. When I started, I had very little clue what I was doing, but over the past 5 years, I have gone from $0 to having an investment portfolio of over $120,000 by age 26. It was not luck that made this happen, but a few smart choices made early, and the ability to stay very disciplined while avoiding the traps that make most people break. In this video, I am going to show you how I went from literally zero invested to six figures step by step, and what you can do to get there too. Before we dive into the details, I have a quick question for you about how much money you are currently investing every month. Is it $50 or perhaps $200 or maybe $1,000? Comment down below, because I would love to hear where you are starting from. Jumping back to the starting point of my investing journey, this basically happened right around the peak of the pandemic in March of 2020. That was when everything was getting locked down, and I was about to graduate college into a world that felt like it was ending. The market had tanked significantly, and from February to March of 2020, the S&P 500 dropped by over 30%. There were a ton of massive companies sitting on a huge discount, but because I was an idiot and only 21 at the time, I was not investing for the long term. I was busy doing something called options trading, which I now realize is such a loser's game in the long term. I was basically just gambling away my money with options when I could have been building real wealth, but that only lasted for about a month or two. I eventually started investing into high-yield dividend stocks because I wanted the cash flow side of things. This was around May and June of 2020, and even then some of the stocks I was picking were way too good to be true. I would buy them thinking I would get 15% a year in cash flow, when in reality the stock price was dropping and the companies were just garbage. By July of 2020, I noticed the market was doing very well and big companies had huge rebounds since the March lows. Yet I had barely made $2. Most of my gains were just from me depositing money rather than actual growth. I decided to completely switch my strategy and focus on dividend growth investing. All this means is that I would buy companies that pay dividends as a way of rewarding their shareholders for holding the stock. I focused on companies that did not necessarily pay high yields immediately, but grew their dividends aggressively. Maybe I was only making $100 a year, but then they would grow that payout by 10 or 15%. With companies like this, the starting yield is low, but over time your income and the stock price itself can grow a lot. Dividend growth was my main strategy for the past 5 years, and it served me well while I held individual stocks. Some of my biggest winners were companies like Microsoft and Costco and JP Morgan. With Microsoft, I invested about $5,000 and eventually sold it for over $9,000 while collecting dividends along the way. With Costco, I invested over $4,000 and sold for $6,700. JP Morgan turned $3,000 into $6,000. I did not 10 times my money, but I got consistent cash flow and secured large profits. My biggest losers did not actually lose money, but they underperformed the market significantly. Companies like Vici Properties and Realty Income and Domino's Pizza were not bad, but they just did not keep up with the S&P 500. For the longest time, I held these individual stocks, but I eventually started adding ETFs, which are just baskets of stocks. The main ETF I like is VU, which tracks the 500 largest companies in the United States. I also liked SHD, which is a dividend growth ETF made by Schwab. One thing I realized over time was that I was underperforming the market by a percentage point or two. Nothing is worse than seeing the market go up 24% while your portfolio only goes up 18%, because that difference creates a massive gap over a long period. I recently changed my entire portfolio to be 70% VO and 20% SAG and 10% VUG. I did this to focus more on ETFs and make my investing a lot more passive and simplified. Right now, my brokerage and Roth IRA sit just under $100,000, and my 401k holds the remaining $24,000. That brings me to the $120,000 mark I am at today. The habits made more of a difference than the actual stock picks, because you have to create a system to reach the six-figure mark. The most important habit is living below your means. When I moved to a different state in 2022, I was driving a 2006 Camry that was fully paid off, and I still drive it today. I do not wear designer clothes, and I am not out here trying to flex on people because I really do not care. I practiced extreme frugality while saving for my first house. I was living in a one-bedroom apartment with literally just a bed and a dresser and a desk. I had no couch and no television because I wanted to save every penny to invest. My living room was blank because I would just work my remote job and play video games and sleep. I am not saying you have to be that extreme, but that habit helped me avoid spending money on things that do not matter. I tracked every single income and expense and kept my rent and utilities as low as possible. During that time, I was only making about $55,000 a year, which is not a lot of money regardless of what people think. I avoided debt traps and did not get into the credit card game or take out dumb loans. It does not matter how much you invest starting out because it is about building the habit of investing the money. In early 2021, I was only investing $200 a month. In 2022, I had months where I only invested $4 because I was focused on a house down payment. It does not matter if you start with $25 or $50, because as your income grows, you will already have the system in place to handle more money. In 2022, I invested about $8,000 total, but by 2023, that jumped to $21,000, and this year, I am on track for much more. On average, I am now investing around $2,900 a month, which is almost $36,000 a year. The main thing I focus on is keeping my expenses flat while scaling my income. You will notice that the $10,000 increments move quicker and quicker over time as the math starts to work in your favor. Even if the market crashes, you should not panic, but just keep buying. In 2022, my portfolio sat flat for 13 months, despite me putting thousands of dollars into it. I knew that long-term the market always goes up. You just have to buy the dip, or buy when it is doing good. If you have a long time horizon, you should not be stressing market dips. It took me a long time to go from 10,000 to 20,000, but then the jumps to 30 and 40 and 50,000 started happening much faster. Just recently, I went from 100,000 to 125,000 in just a couple of months. It starts to move like a snowball once you hit that first six-figure milestone. If the market goes up, you make money, and if the market goes down, you get a discount. It is incredible how many people will buy a shirt because it is 30% off, but will run away from the S&P 500 when it drops 30%. If you can have the mindset that you are buying something valuable on discount, you will be rewarded. Time in the market matters a lot more than timing the market, so do not worry about trying to be perfect. Patience is the only real edge you have. I had a full year where my portfolio did nothing, but I kept investing because I knew the results would eventually show. My $120,000 could double or triple over the next decade, even if I never added another cent, but I am going to keep adding because I want it to grow even faster. It took me 5 years to hit the first 100,000, but the next 100,000 will take much less time. It is never too late to start investing, whether you have $10 or $1,000. Once you see the results, you will get hooked on finding ways to make more money or reduce expenses. You do not have to live in a blank apartment forever, but doing it for a short time can change your life. I am starting a new series called Road to 200,000, where I will update my portfolio every month. My goal this year is to invest at least $40,000, and I am going to stay disciplined until I hit it. If you enjoyed this look at the boring truth of wealth building, hit the subscribe button and stay calm. I will see you in the next one. Peace.